Hi everybody, this is Warren Herman, and we're going to make a quick video about how to become a man. So this video points us to a really important step in our maturation as human beings. Because whatever in our lives we dislike, whatever is deep down in our hearts that we don't want to be, whatever we fear most deeply, these deep wounds that are in us, are what drive and dominate our life. In Star Wars, Yoda says, "Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny." And so the things that we hate, hatred of, people who've, this kind of an unconscious hatred of ways we've been harmed or people we feel have harmed us in our lives, create in our mind an image of who we don't want to be that we keep, inside. And so this could be, whether it's, there's a lot of times we can kind of have these, whether, and I think that this is something that happens to all people, whether our parents are positive or negative, we always create these images and we end up with different kinds of wounds depending on what kind of family we grew up in. Sometimes what happens though is we end up like, let's say somebody grows up in a home where they are abused or something. They're beaten up all the time and it's terrible. Let's say that they then say, "I'll never be like that." And so what happens is in their unconscious mind, there is a feared self. And that feared self then creates coping mechanisms where like there are intrusive thoughts that come in their mind that come out that are kind of the alert is on so that they end up making their whole life about not being this person. And they end up overcorrecting. And they develop these coping mechanisms where they try to not be that person and they try to avoid anything that looks like that person. And so what happens is that unconscious hatred, even though they're a victim, so to speak, in this situation, ends up dominating their destiny because it creates coping mechanisms that then drive their life, and their mind is all a fog because they don't know why they're doing what they're doing, because deep in the basement there is this resentment, this feared self that is really running the show. And so we need to be able to, again, let life flow in us, in a sense. We need to life, love, and empathy flow within our personality again. And that's the only way that we can really find freedom, because what happens is that really the thing that's running the show then are these people we're trying to escape. And so I think that something that's very important about this, though, is that it also helps us, with Star Wars, there's this thing where Yoda says to Luke, you must confront Vader. Then and only then a Jedi will you be. And the thing is, even in the case of this person who, would say, how does this person become a man if the person has this father wound, if the person has this issue? Well, the pathway is very much laid out for us in Star Wars. The pathway to becoming a parent, to becoming parental, is what Luke by seeing in the father, in Darth Vader, the good, by being compassionate toward his father, by refusing to kill his father. That's the way in which Luke becomes a man, the way in which he becomes a real man, becomes a Jedi in the thing. And that's the path to maturation for those who have that type of father wound. I think that all father wounds basically are this phrase, "I'll never be him." And if we have, a father, to the extent that we admire our father, it's "I'll never be him," meaning he's better than me and I can't get to that height. And if our father is, in our mind, a negative figure, it's "I'll never be him," meaning I need to run away from anything that looks like that. And so we have these two options to become a man. One is empathy for the negative father in our lives, and the other one, which is to accept the father's empathy for you. To say, hey, it's not about you performing and having to be as good as him. The whole point of his love was that he loved you. Like, you don't have to earn his approval. You don't have to be him to earn his love. You don't have to be, all those things. The whole point was that he was proud of you and he loved you and all that. So that's kind of one route. So again, it's like we have those two things. I'll never be him. And that negative tone, it's about, trying to not become one's father and running away from the things, and trying to avoid all that. And to really be disturbed if anything like him crops up in you. And the other thing is the sense of like trying to run toward this ever receding goal of being like your father, I think. So I think this is the father wound. And I think that ultimately we want to go into that world of empathy where we see the brokenness of, of people, where we can have love, we have to come out of the coping mechanisms. We build shells, whether it's a shell of trying to be like, trying not to be our father, we kind of build this other image, or an image, to try to live up to our father. And we have to kind of realize love. We have to kind of realize love. And, if you think about, there's so many ways we can use this analogy of a little chick, that's inside the egg, but that's not mature. The egg is all nice and white and squeaky clean. But then the little chick comes out and he looks yucky. But that's the only way that he gets to be loved by his mother, is if he's outside and looks yucky first, and then has to dry off, with the warmth of his mother and everything like that. So only through being yucky are we comforted by this maternal warmth, and made to look nice and cute, even though we're immature. We are loved but immature. We're little chicks. We're not squeaky clean eggs that are perfect and white and all that. And so the thing is, we have to say, okay, how do I and this is a multifaceted metaphor, because it also leads us to think about how can we let go of the images, the defensive shell that we have built, whether it's this shell of, maybe for someone who has, like a kind of a positive father wound, it's somebody who maybe is trying to, all the things they're trying to build up to earn love of their father rather than accepting their father's love. Or if someone has a negative father wound, all the things they're trying to build up to not be like their father. So it's like we're looking at these shells and then realizing, okay, well, we're human and our father is human. And one way I think that's really effective, I think it needs to be recontextualized, but because I think there's some very serious spiritual errors contained in the approach. But I think that the work of Byron Katie, with its Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, is an effective way of at least identifying the different wounds and all the different judgments we have of father figures in our lives. And I think that if we apply this, especially if we try to practice this technique prayerfully, like, incorporating prayer into it, we might be able to kind of come out of, some of the kind of spiritual errors, the kind of the Zen type errors that are in it. So I think that that's the way forward for us to become a man, because if we want to fulfill those words of Yoda, it says, "You must confront Vader. Then, and only then, a Jedi will you be."